If everyone could please take their seats.
Instruments versus
No, I think that's a
Reconvening, I'd
Brian told me
like to
that.
remind everyone
Quite a
to
bit on
please
it.
speak into the microphone for those that are listening online. The first item on today's agenda is the President's report. President Wolf?
I don't think so.
We have to finish our finance business.
Wrong agenda. Okay. Okay, Finance Committee meeting. Senator Covington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're taking up the matter about which we had information items yesterday, the fiscal year 2017 state appropriations request for operations, also the appropriations request for capital. We covered this yesterday afternoon in some depth, and if I'm certainly, the Vice President would take questions if there are any further questions, but if not, well, first let me ask, are there any further questions of the Vice President with respect to the two items this morning? Thank you. Well, then, in that event, I would ask for a motion and a second from the committee with respect to the two items, which is to, proper wording, to allow the President and his staff to proceed with the details presented according to the information given with respect to both the, well, let's take up the operations first separately. Is there a motion?
move approval.
Is there a second in the committee?
Second?
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
All committee votes in favor.
Mr. Chairman, we move the same to the full board.
Any discussion? Cindy, call the roll.
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Cups,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Henriksen,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman,
Yes.
Curator Stewart.
Aye.
All votes in favor.
Thank you. And now with respect to the capital appropriations request, a motion and a second, please, to recommend to the full board to approve the President be authorized to submit to the appropriate state officers the university's fiscal year 2017 state capital appropriations request and the higher education capital fund projects as shown on the schedule that has been presented to us. Is there such a motion from the committee?
So moved?
Second.
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman.
Yes.
All committee votes in favor.
Mr. Chairman, the committee recommends the same to the full board.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Cindy?
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Cups,
Yes.
Curator Graham,
Yes.
Curator Henriksen,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
Curator Steelman,
Yes.
Curator Stewart.
Aye.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Thank you. This concludes the business of the Finance Committee. Is there a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee?
So move.
Second?
Curator Covington,
Yes.
Curator Phillips,
Yes.
Curator Snowden,
Yes.
and Curator Steelman.
Yes.
Okay. All votes in favor.
We're
Thank you,
adjourned,
ma'am.
Chairman.
The next item on the agenda is the board chairman's report, and as been our custom this year is that we're addressing issues concerning the year of the student. I would call on Associate Vice President Steve Graham to bring forth the discussion. Okay. Thank you.
Once again, I'm actually delighted to be back again to cover another one of the topics that was outlined by Curator Cups during a February meeting about the Year of the Student. What we hope to talk about today are the bottlenecks, the pinch points, or what we sometimes see as the barriers for students. And they come in all shapes and sizes, and so get some feedback here? Thank you. So what we want to do is just kind of go through some of the areas where we typically find problems where you're looking for classroom space. Are there enough classes? How do students stumble, and how do the campuses trying to address them? The campuses are very focused on retention and graduation. It's embedded in all of their strategic plans, and of course we all know that as part of the performance measures that we get funding on. So what we are doing today is we're going to ask Jeff Caulfield from Missouri S&T to come up and walk us through. Once again, he was part of that team that you saw last time. That he's one of the campus leads for retention and graduation. And so he's going to walk us through some of the barriers and present some slides. And then we also have representatives from each of our campuses because you might have questions. So we have Kim McNeely from UMKC, Beth Eckelkamp from UMSL, and D'Angela Burns-Wallace from MU. And so if you have questions, we'll be able to direct those toward a specific campus. As good as Jeff is, he probably won't be able to answer them all by himself. So without further ado, I'll invite Jeff up to step through.
Thank you, Steve.
Click it.
Yeah. So I want to thank, again, Steve introduced the team members and others that have been working with us on this, working for 3 weeks now, putting together, I believe you all have a handout, sort of an executive summary of some of the points we're going to cover. And we'll go through the PowerPoint pretty quickly, saving most of our time, I hope, for interaction with the board and answering some of your questions. Just wanted to hit a definition first. Curator Cups asked us to address bottlenecks. Bottleneck courses, I believe, was the phrase that Curator Cups used. And when you look out there in the literature, there's a lot of different words out there: barriers, roadblocks, gateway courses, and so on. But we're just going to focus here on any delay that might be delaying our students' progress towards timely graduation. And we decided as a group that maybe it would be nice to personalize this and look at a typical student, and we will follow her through perhaps her last high school years and recruitment, and then the admissions process, and then transition to college, picking a major, that journey through college, which takes multiple paths for every different student, and ultimately graduation, just to sort of set the stage. And then we'll talk about some of the things that we're still working on. We don't have this all worked out perfectly. As we talked about this as a team, we realize there are still areas where we need to address the dynamics of our young people showing up today. And it is a dynamic world. They are changing every year as they go in with their needs and some of the barriers or roadblocks that we face. So in recruitment, this young lady, if you imagine, in my case, I would be imagining my granddaughter, but some of you might be imagining your daughters or a neighbor or a niece or whatever. It's critical that she enroll at an institution that's a good fit. We talk about this a lot now in higher education, a good fit. The culture of the campus, the academic rigor expected. And the recruitment materials need to be very, very clear. And we work on this constantly. All 4 campuses are updating their recruiting materials every year to make sure that we are, for the most part, getting the students that come to our campuses, it's a good fit for them. We work with them not only through our recruiting materials, but at orientation days and recruiting days and so on throughout the state. And then that transition to college, pardon me. The orientation experience, which varies from campus to campus. We might have summer welcome, we might have an O-week experience. Each campus has a very particular orientation experience to try to help the students, at least that very first touch when they get on campus, to get a feel for the expectations, really. And then the early advising, very, very critical, especially if this young lady is undecided. I was reading some literature last night. It turns out that about 25, depending on what you read, 25 to 50% of our young people are undecided, and will admit that they're undecided. There's probably a lot more of them that are undecided that don't admit they're undecided. But 25 to 50% typically nationally are undecided when they arrive. That's a challenge. And then placement in correct courses is critical, especially that first semester or two. We do various levels of math testing, English testing, placement testing at the different campuses, trying to make sure we get the students in the right spot at the right time so that they can be successful. And that leads to them mastering those basics, the general ed courses, and completing the prerequisites. It's a challenge sometimes to get them into the correct prerequisites because sometimes they don't want to take them right away. And so we have to do some encouraging and advising along that step. And then picking a major, this is incredibly important. I mentioned that about 25 to 50% of our incoming students are undecided. Our job is not to quickly get them to pick a major, but to correctly pick a major that's correct for them. And sometimes that takes some time. Again, reading some of the literature last night in my room, it turns out that about 65 to 75% of our students will change majors at least once. The average nationally is to change majors 2 or 3 times throughout the course of the matriculation. So that's a challenge because obviously when you change majors, maybe that first semester not so much of a challenge, second or third semester that's going to become a bottleneck. That's going to become a barrier because we're going to have to redo some of the classes in all likelihood. So career advising, what we call developmental advising, is critical. And over the years, obviously I'm an old guy, and when I went to college in the 70s, there wasn't much of that going on. There wasn't much advising of any kind going on when I started college back then. But now we spend a lot of time not just getting kids in the right class, but developmentally advising those students and trying to guide them, because again, the correct fit is critical. Under this comprehensive retention initiative that was initiated by President Wolf and the general officers, we now are working towards, as the name implies, comprehensive, but perhaps more importantly, consistent software tools across the 4 campuses that are going to help us meet the students where they're at. Our 17 and 18-year-olds today, they expect to be met with technology to guide them, not just an advisor to guide them. And working in concert, we're developing those tools. And so then we get, after we transition into college, our young lady that we are thinking about needs to take the right courses, get the right experiences, and work her way towards the junior year and the senior year. We have degree audit systems. We've had those for a number of years. Again, under the Comprehensive Retention Initiative, we are now working on, I believe in July, is that when we're kicking off our You Achieve and You Direct kickoffs of the new software systems that will update our degree audit systems and also a degree mapping and planner system. So we are working to be at not just adequate, but at state of the art in terms of our technology for helping students avoid some of these barriers and bottlenecks. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to avoid every one of them, but we're doing a much better job, and we'll do a much better job in terms of avoiding those things through the mapping and planning using technology. Transfer credit's still an issue. We have students that come to us from community colleges, from colleges out of state, more and more from colleges overseas. And transfer credit monitoring and correctly giving transfer credit and figuring out what fits, what doesn't, and so on is still an issue. Again, we are working towards having software that will not just allow us to input by hand transfer credit, which I think is what we still do at most of our campuses. That takes time. It's not very timely for us in terms of scheduling classes. But we will have scanning software that will automatically scan in, at least from the US, most of the transcripts that we get. Junior year, all 4 of our campuses will require our students, at least as best we can, we will encourage our students to submit a graduation plan, to make sure that the courses are online, make sure we're not going to hit one of those unfortunate situations where at the last semester or two, a class isn't offered that they need to graduate, they have to come back a semester later. That's very unfortunate. I'm not going to try to tell you it never happens. Happens fairly infrequently. When it does happen, we do everything in our power to make the students whole and help them out. And sometimes there's ways we can do that through an online class, even through another university that we might transfer in at the last minute. There's things we can do, but we're trying to avoid that through careful planning. And then the senior year, we have priority scheduling. Sometimes our students, and this is sort of a problem that we haven't quite figured out how to address, sometimes our students do not enroll, even though they're seniors and they have priority scheduling, they do not enroll right away and may wait until the last minute to enroll and then be unhappy about the fact that perhaps a class is not available. It filled up, it wasn't scheduled, whatever. Why would they do that? Well, because when they enroll, they will ultimately get a check. They wish they would get a check. They will get a bill. And so some of our students are very bright, so a lot of them will avoid enrolling during the priority scheduling and just put off getting that bill and perhaps for a couple, 3 months, which leads to planning and scheduling problems. We try to check for that. We're going to have better software to help us do that in the future, but certainly that's still an ongoing problem. And as I mentioned, the new tools are making the process more efficient. Our students are very tech savvy. They want to use these software tools. We're rolling them out. And through that comprehensive retention initiative, a number of those tools at all 4 campuses are becoming available. So let me talk a little bit about some of the potential bottlenecks and barriers that we're still working on. Students sometimes make assumptions. Not shocking, but if a student, for instance, decides to go on an internship over the summer and take a class at a local community college and doesn't check back with the advisor or doesn't look on the transfer website and takes a class they assume is going to fulfill a requirement and then comes back and finds out that it didn't, that could create a bottleneck. We would try to work that out as best we can through some sort of substitution and waiver process. Transfer students might find this issue very frustrating. We try again to encourage our students to be very proactive and to check with us ahead of time. Other potential bottlenecks, and this one is certainly one we're still working on, popular competitive degree programs have limited capacity. We have a lot of students that want to go into certain health science, say physical therapy, or specific engineering programs. Those programs have some limited capacities. Students may gain entry to the university, perhaps not perform at a level high enough to gain entry into their program of choice. That can create a bottleneck that we need to work on. And advisors need to intervene early, try to get alternatives identified for those students, maybe another major, maybe some minors, work on some alternatives that would be a good fit for our students. Here's a screenshot, which you probably can't see much of the details here, but this is just from our new Starfish. On each campus, it's called something different. I think it's usually something Connect, like S&T Connect at S&T. This is our advising tool that allows students to look at recommended success path resources, people in their success network that they can contact. They can make appointments, they can see their classes, they can see office hours. You can't see this, but I can see that there's actually a flag being lifted, if I can say that, a flag being lifted. This student is in danger of failing in one of the classes, and there's a big red flag there. It's not red on the screen. These sort of technology enhancements are really helping us communicate quickly, almost real time with our students in terms of keeping them on track. Now again, we are still dealing with human beings. They're 18 and 19 and 20 years old. Some of them won't look at that red flag very quickly, or they will choose to ignore it. And so we do what we can, and we really try very hard. But advising requires a personal touch. We need to get with them, looking them in the eye, and we have advising centers, student success centers at all 4 campuses where students are encouraged to come. And there's some more. Lab sections may be, especially lab sections, but some classroom sections may be at capacity. With growing enrollment, certainly we have some issues. Might not have as many professors as we need to offer as many sections as we need, but we're working on that. Laboratories are expensive to build and maintain and deliver, and so there's some innovative experiments going on at some of the campuses with hybrid and online laboratory sections. At our university, Missouri S&T, we are now able to offer twice as many seats in our chemistry labs because our chemistry folks, under the leadership of Klaus has come up with alternate lab weeks where the students do their labs in lab one week and then half of the students go off and do a lab with a group somewhere on campus. Makes us kind of nervous. They're doing chemistry labs somewhere on campus on their own in the res halls or in the Havener Center or someplace. But it's working out really well. We can offer twice as many seats now because we're going every other week. Scheduling labs earlier in the day or even later in the evening or even on the weekends. We do that at some of our universities with field work and field sort of labs. And we still have some perplexing roadblocks to work on. All right, we don't want to give you the impression that we got everything under control. We're working on this. It's a work in progress. As I mentioned, manual entry of transcripts slows us down. We're working on that. Students have very serious financial aid challenges. Students sometimes have to take off a semester to go back to work or go home to take care of family. Or they might drop down from 15 hours to 9 hours just to attend part-time because they got to work. And so those are bottlenecks that we can try to address, but they are realities of 21st century going to college. General education requirements vary among majors, vary among institutions, vary among accrediting agencies. So in engineering, my field, we have ABET accreditation. General education requirements are fairly specific and may not be directly transferable to another major if someone decides to change majors. We try to smooth that out as best we can. And as I mentioned, shortage of lab space and not enough technology-enhanced classrooms. So again, I want to send out a big thank you to the leadership of the university because the Comprehensive Retention Initiative has really helped us get together on all 4 campuses in many ways, but in one very important way. We are now rolling out consistent, comprehensive technology such as UAchieve, UDirect, Schedule Builder. These are mappers and planners and degree audit systems that are going to help us be much more effective in hopefully avoiding most of these bottlenecks. Here's another screenshot from our Starfish software, which is just giving you a feel for how we can personalize the software. We can interact, there's pictures, we can do real-time chatting with our students, get them the resources they need, make appointments online. But again, that personal touch is always very important. So this is our last slide here. The bottom line on bottlenecks, it's not incredibly complicated, it's just very difficult in terms of getting it done. Early, clear, accurate, and ongoing communication. Well, that's true in almost every human endeavor, right? But this is very critical when we're dealing with 18 and 19-year-olds. So very good communication between students, staff, and faculty. And then the things that we do have control over a little bit is we have to be financially prudent, we have to optimize our scheduling and planning of course offerings, and we have to adopt creative business practices to help our students successfully move their way through without undue delay. So I believe with that, Steve, we are ready for questions.
I have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
How are you currently using predictable analytics to anticipate these bottlenecks and challenges and so forth moving forward so you can plan accordingly?
I'm sure it varies at every campus, so I can address what we do at our campus in the registrar's office somewhat. And so the analytics are, we look at pre-enrollment figures, we look at previous 2 to 3 years enrollment figures in specific courses and try to predict where we're going to have the need. And then there's just, I think weekly, if not more than weekly, this time of year, we send out reminders to each of the department chairs, hey, we need a couple more sections here, we need a couple more sections there from our registrar.
But is that a part of the enrollment process as well as you're
Enrollment of the new freshmen?
For new freshmen?
Certainly. I mean, as we do our orientation days, either summer welcomes or on our campus, they're called pro days. We've got that data in there. We know what they've enrolled in. We know what we need for the upcoming pro days that are, we do a number of them throughout the summer. I don't know if, yes, D'Angela?
Good morning. One of the things about predictive analytics, we're trying to incorporate it, I think, at all of our campuses on many different levels. So moving beyond kind of the kind of usage and engagement of where students are and what they are doing, to also look at how are we layering using the predictive analytics and how we schedule the courses, using the predictive analytics in making targets using the software. So if we can see that students that have certain ranges of GPAs that don't have declared majors at a certain point, and that we can find those milestone points and say, we can look at students that if their GPA falls below a 2.8 and they haven't declared a major by 45 credit hours, that student is predicted to have a lower graduation rate. We are then working that backwards so that in advising, we're identifying students that may have that potential earlier and then putting intrusive and intentional advising around that student so they never even get to that point, right? And so it's just one example of how we're trying to take the predictive analytics, understand it at the 50,000 feet to understand where those pressure points are or where those flag areas are, pull the data apart to then roll that back down so that we can affect individual students, not even at real time, but pre a particular issue or point so that that student potentially never even gets to that point that we can see as a problem area.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions. Oops. So the first one is, and this is kind of a squishy, I'm looking for a squishy answer, not a precise answer, but to what extent are the bottlenecks that you've been talking about the driver of delayed graduation rates as opposed to other factors like economics or students who like a campus environment and aren't disciplined enough to get through in the traditional period of time? Do you or does anybody have an estimate about what the course offering bottlenecks are as a driver of delayed graduation as opposed to other factors that aren't in our control?
I don't know, does anybody want to, Kim, do you want to try to address that specifically?
I'll do my best squishy, okay?
Yeah, squishy, because I'm an engineer, I don't do squishy.
Squishy, psychologists do squishy, we love squishy. I think the issue, the most important issues that we found that are both nationally is that idea of having students enroll in the appropriate courses. Many times students think, or folks think that it's at the end of their career. The first year is the critical one. And so as we make clear, purposeful decisions to make sure we get those students in those gateway courses, the reason why that's important because those are the courses that help them try on that fit of major. And coupled with having really good advising that if I'm going to be an engineer and I'm failing calculus, our first step administratively is to make sure that we get them in the math as opposed to avoiding the math and have enough math sections in that very first year so that we can make that career fit decision then. And our planning tools are getting better and better to make sure that we have those earlier bottlenecks taken care of, because sometimes previously those were perceived as, it's not a big deal, you'll just take that the next semester. Well, it's very different than that, what we understand now. Some of those critical courses are incredibly important, and we need to ensure that capacity early on. So a lot of our effort is being really focused at the early part as the student's career as opposed to the late. Did that help with squishy a bit, or clarification?
What I'm kind of wondering too is like how much is under our control versus
How much is not?
Right.
So what we find is, my background is both in enrollment management and in academic affairs. And one of the things that we have tried to do around doing this work is understanding the research, the literature, and the data so that we're layering both the theory and the practice together. And in the traditional theory around student success, there are two main factors. What happens is that there's student behavior, and then there's institutional conditions. And so that squishy part that you're talking about is the student behavior. When are they choosing to take classes? How are they engaging in things? The financial things that happen to them in just their course of life. They're working and having to make trade-offs. Student behavior is harder from an institutional standpoint for us to control. The institutional conditions are the ones that we have better control over, and a lot of the bottlenecks that we've identified kind of focus on the institutional conditions. Depending on institution and literature that you read, some would say that it's 50-50, some would say that depending on the student demographics that it may be even more skewed, but there's a reality that even in some of the institutional conditions changing, you can help change student behavior as well. As we put in things like advising or those early courses, you're getting students to think differently about when to engage and what their issues are and how to balance. You're getting them to think differently about when they need to talk to that advisor or when they need to seek help. So while we don't have as much control in that squishy area, our hope is that as we focus on more of the institutional conditions, we can still have some effect on some of the other aspects that are affecting the students' choices and success.
So that may lead to my second question. We focus pretty much on the traditional student, right? And I understand that it's important both for economics to allow students who wish to and have the economics to get through in 4 or 5 years, whatever the degree period is. It's important economically to make it available, and you're working on it real hard. And also it's important competitively because you compare graduation rates when you're looking for a school, right? And we get graded on that to some extent.
It's part of the rankings, yes.
But it seems to me that the universities are now also doing lifelong learning, and we do non-traditional students more and more, particularly with the question about whether a college degree is worth it or not. So my second question is the extent to which we're able to segregate those kinds of students from our comparative statistics. So if we had those who are traditional and are going for a 4-year or a 5-year degree, we analyze them, but those that are doing other types of courses or taking it over time, the non-traditional students, the work study, where they don't expect or don't necessarily want to get through in 5 or 6 years, do we or can we segregate those, and other professional offerings where we give courses to people that are in professions? Maybe they take it for credit, thinking eventually they'll get a master's or a PhD, but do those all get folded into how we get compared, or can we look at it separately? So it seems to me that some of our growth can be in those non-traditional areas, but we ought not get penalized on our comparisons.
And that's certainly true. Typically, with retention rates, we are looking at first-time, full-time incoming freshmen, sort of the traditional first-year to second-year retention rate. Now, graduation rates, we can kind of separate those out. But an extension of your question, and I may ask Elizabeth to come up and talk a little bit about this, is this issue of swirling, where we have students that are enrolled perhaps at UMSL and then taking lots of classes elsewhere, and so their home campus may be their home campus, but they're still taking classes at other institutions, and maybe you want to address that a little bit?
Sure. Can I take it back maybe to the original question
Sure,
about
yes, please.
our non-traditional students and how we're serving them possibly different than our traditional 18-year-old freshmen? So I'm sure that everyone's aware that our student population at UMSL, average age is quite a bit above 18. We're looking at average age of 27. A lot of transfer students, a lot of students who are coming to us to complete degrees. And so that the burden on us to create policies that allow those students to make progress to graduation, possibly in a different way than our traditional first-time freshmen, and very specialized advising for this wide variety of student populations that have different needs. Looking at creative scheduling patterns So perhaps looking at Friday evening, Saturday courses, creating patterns for scheduling that would allow students that are in a very non-traditional place to complete degrees. So the impetus is on us to be creative to meet those students where they are. In terms of the students that we work with that are swirling, just recently we've really had to readdress, for instance, our gen ed transfer credit acceptance. Because so many of our students are swirling, there should never be a scenario in which a student completes a gen ed course on the MU campus, transfers to the UMSL campus, and that course doesn't count for their gen ed. So we're really trying to put some policies in place that are ethical when it comes to working with our students that are swirling, especially within the system. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Well, I think that's helpful, and I'm glad that we are accommodating non-traditional students. My question had more to do with the measuring and the comparisons. And actually, I don't know, about 4 or 6 months ago, I asked for a comparison of the graduation rates of the different campuses. And I think I didn't follow up that question. I got back what the graduations rates were. I didn't have what I would compare to the SEC or some other, peer group. So I'm still interested in what our graduation rate is, but more importantly, what goes into that. Does it fold in all, my mother started when she was 18 and walked through graduation with me when she was 64. So did that skew the statistics for her graduation rate?
She wasn't part of our 6-year graduation rate.
Right. But she might have skewed it if she was included on the time it took for her to graduate.
And Kim, do you want to?
Sure. I would, just on the data side and the tracking numbers of that, a couple of issues that I bring up. Students are, the data is always started on their entry into the university, and so they're classified as first-time, full-time freshmen or transfer based on that internal record coming in. The interesting thing, particularly on our campus that we're dealing with, is this idea of how we, the second part of that classification, which is degree seeking or non-degree seeking or visiting. Some of our students will come to our campus intentionally not wanting to end up with a degree. And right now, the way that our financial aid structures are set up, we make them choose degree seeking. We don't make them. They have to choose degree seeking and let us think that they are planning to complete a degree at our institution so that they can have access to fuller financial aid and support packages. And so as we start thinking about data sets, one of the things that I think that we need to collectively start thinking about is what is the intention of the student as they enter? Is it really to complete a degree or is it not? And address that wholly, because certainly if a student has good reason as to why they don't want to complete their degree with us, we should be, it's hard to change their mind if it makes sense. The other part of the issue that I would bring up there as far as tracking, whoops, just lost my train of thought there. Those are the critical issues. And then the final part of it, it's back, is that I think it's as important, sorry, just old age, I don't know. I think the other part, particularly at some of our campuses, maybe more closely related to UMSL and UMKC, is that I really wish that we would look at degree completion period, because many of our students will communicate to us that they want to do their first 2 years and get a really great foundation. Now, we're going to work really hard to help them see that UMKC is the place that they want to stay, but particularly in some of our professional schools where there isn't enough space, if they completed another institution and we've provided that amazing foundation for them on the front end, I think that should factor into how we look at our degree completion rates, not just at our single institution, but across. So non-degree seeking is a big issue, and then where they complete that degree, I think, would help us truly understand our progress and support.
So I'm wondering, and this isn't a question, but if we looked hard at the metrics, whether we could improve our graduation rates by making sure that we're only counting degree-seeking students, if we're not already doing that.
And our institutional research folks who report our data to the federal government look very carefully at how to accurately and frankly to best characterize our graduation rates within the bounds of those limitations. So, yeah.
What we input affects what they what they look at on the output side. And
Certainly.
I know it's competitive, so let's treat our non-traditional students well and accommodate them, but not be skewed because of them. That's my thought.
In a kind of a follow-on question to this issue about swirling, how are we communicating to our students whether the courses that they've taken elsewhere will count? Lots of horror stories about students getting to the last semester to find out that their incoming freshman English class that they took elsewhere isn't going to count, and now they're 3 hours short of graduation. How do we communicate that, and so that they're secure that all the credits they've taken really work?
And briefly before, I guess Elizabeth's going to step up to the mic, but I know part of that is what I mentioned in the manual entry of transcripts. So we have students, I'm just going to be blunt here, we have students who will take courses elsewhere. I've had my own advisees and not tell me, so I couldn't really encourage them to transfer that credit in because I didn't even know they took it. And then, you know, somewhere down the line, junior year, I'll say, oh yeah, and I took this humanities course there or this science course there. And then we got to figure out if it worked or not. And again, if it didn't, if it wasn't quite right, there's usually ways we can make the student whole using some sort of substitution or waiver process, but not always. So again, it's that communication. We've got to get them, and I believe with the new software that will scan in and automatically load up transcripts, if we can get them to send those transcripts in, we'll kind of avoid some of those problems, at least avoid having them wait till the end. But Elizabeth?
I'm obsessed with this, so I'm we have transfer coordinators who work with students who come seeking information about the university, and we need to make sure that they're armed with all of the absolutely most current, most correct data. We have transfer databases that we have to stay on top of. Students can access those databases, take a look and see if a course comes in. But bottom line is that has to be communicated clearly to them at the time of matriculation. So we're starting to create on our campus transfer task forces. So we're bringing advisors, retention coordinators, folks from the admissions office together to work on clear communication so that there are no surprises. I hate surprises. I have to meet with students who have those surprises, and we always make it right for them, but we do not want that to happen. So we take that, I think, on all campuses very, very seriously. So thank you for raising that question.
Good communication is key.
Yes.
Is the advent of online learning offerings, and Steve talked about between campuses that we're going to double it, and maybe even quicker than that, I would hope. Is that one of the solutions, that if we had online learning or learning at your own pace, at your own time, and made it known you could get credit even if it isn't offered on campus, is that another solution to the bottleneck?
Certainly, and we're utilizing it already. We have students, this summer we have students from S&T who are off working, say, at Boeing or Emerson Electric, and they're doing an online course, maybe not from S&T, maybe from MU, maybe from UC Berkeley. We'll transfer those courses in as long as they are, obviously, they transferable credit. So that's going to lend some more flexibility. Is it going to solve all the problems? Probably not, but certainly once that becomes more seamless, it's becoming more seamless, the online and the face-to-face and the hybrid, it's all learning, just different modes, and yeah, that's going to help.
In previous conversations, there's quite a bit of talk about student finances being probably the biggest bottleneck.
Probably is.
Is there anything that we can do or we are doing to identify those students early to try to get them to get the help they need?
Yeah, I think, and D'Angela, maybe you can address some of the predictive analytics that we use to do that. Go ahead.
So I think on all of our campuses, particularly as we're looking at where students are running into an issue, the financial is at the heart of a lot of our students. And so I think for all of us, we've taken kind of a multi-layer approach. So the first starts with, again, that advising and that communication and that touch. So for example, on our campus, we have a task force that includes the cashier's office, financial aid, and academic advisors, in which we are literally tracking the students back, looking at who is in a potential, who is not paying, what types of things are causing them not to pay, and doing direct outreach where in just one semester, we were able to have 10,000 touches in that group of students that had an outstanding balance and move that balance from 10 million down to 2 million outstanding. But part of that was that we had to use some of the systems, the communication between the various offices that directly work with each student, and be able to identify those students, put them with the right resources at the right time, and show them that this is impacting their registration, other aspects of their education, but we had to coordinate those efforts. And I know that it's kind of slow going for many of us, but it's the beginning of that conversation. Advisors are talking to financial aid, they're talking to cashiers. We know when a student is in danger, and we're able to put up flags through our Starfish system to say there is something coming here before a student gets in danger. And if a student is in danger, then we have a mechanism, we're starting to put the mechanisms in place to say, now here are the resources we have to address that. There's still a reality that we have students that are struggling financially, and we're trying to also be proactive at the beginning, early in the process, whether it's orientation or even that prospective student, to talk about fit, where we started, to ensure students understand what the costs are, what this means for them, how do they budget. And I think all of us, as we look at various metrics that we're working on, are looking at what does that debt burden look like for the students, and how do we get them to understand that and make right choices and provide the resources to help them make those successful choices along the way. So there's many different ways we're coming at it, but it is still one of our largest issues and one that we have a lot of work to do around.
This is a big issue on our campus. We have over half of our students are Pell eligible, and Pell grants alone will not cover the cost of a university education. So we do have students that are running out of aid at the end. They're 3, 6, 12, 15 hours away from graduating, and they have no access to any kinds of loans, any kind of funds. So we've really been looking at that senior degree completion scholarship. Lots of strategic dollars have been invested in that with great results. These are not students who've been irresponsible. These are students who've done everything right. They simply have stalled out because of lack of funds. We've got some donors that are behind that. It's been a great thing for our university. My college alone, we had over the last 3 commencements, we graduated 300 plus students that we couldn't have graduated without the senior degree completion funding. So I just wanted to add that as a really positive thing for our campus.
How are we doing in terms of time?
We probably ought to wrap it up, so.
I just want to make one comment. I think thank you for bringing these issues up and for allowing us to talk with the board. I'm delighted at the interest that the board has in terms of how we take care of our students. And I guess I would also point out, things are different now, as you can see. Each of the campuses have people who specialize in this. You can tell from the depth of knowledge that they have, and it's really making a difference. And we're putting some tools in. The transfer credit is one that we're always working on. The transfer articulation agreements are there. But we're looking, can our tools be easier to use? They're all up there, but then a student has to go and find it. And so we're looking at all different kinds of things. But you can see that we've obviously ramped up our effort by the talent that's here today. And so I do want to thank all of my co-conspirators today for such a great job, and for Jeff for standing up, fielding all the questions. So, anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chancellor Lofton.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to talk a bit about the operating plan here in Missouri, here in Columbia. The title you see in front of you right now is the most succinct way to characterize who we are. We view ourselves as a world-class institution, attracting students not only from every county in Missouri, but every state in the nation, and over 120 foreign countries. We also are, of course, the historic land-grant institution for the state, which talks about access and the practical conversion of our research into things people can use both in Missouri in the nation and in the world. Let's see if I can make this work properly. This is a short statement which summarizes our mission. There's some key words I want you to pick out of this. The first is interdisciplinary. This campus, when I arrived here, having been on 6 other campuses in my career, was the most collaborative campus I'd ever seen. Collaboration, although we talk about it a lot, is not easy to achieve. The structure of the academy almost mitigates against it. Departmental and college arrangements provide, we call them silos or stovepipes that really inhibit the ability of individuals to cross boundaries that are artificially created by our structures. And secondly, there is an inhibitor for young faculty to collaborate. Oftentimes the culture of a department is such that a young faculty member is afraid to reach across those boundaries and actually begin to collaborate until they cross the barrier of tenure. Now, the provost and I have talked about this a lot. We really strive here to try to get rid of that barrier. But it is almost intrinsic to universities nationwide and worldwide. But we've got to get past that. Another key issue here is simply the fact we have worked hard long before I got here to figure out what we're good at. We all know that you gain more by building on your strengths than simply trying to correct your weaknesses. And so Mizzou, through Mizzou Advantage in particular, worked hard years ago to say, here are a few things we do very well already. And by placing investments in them, we will achieve true stature as a world-class institution in those particular areas. One thing I want to remind you of is why it matters that we are a member and want to remain a member of the AAU. This is my elevator speech, basically. There are 2 basic components. Whether you like it or not, we are driven by brand. People are attracted to brands. They attach value to brands. And there's a whole marketing world out there which assures that goes forward and is amplified over time. The AAU is the #1 brand in America for higher education. There are 62 institutions as members, 60 of which are in the United States. And they represent, typically, we call them the best research institutions in the world. Missouri was invited a long time ago in the very early part of the 20th century to be a member of the AAU. And we want to retain that status and make it ever more stable. But an issue for us is that there are ramifications of that. The brand we have is a great attractant, not simply to students, many of whom don't know what AAU is, but they get it indirectly. But it is a very real attractant for faculty. Faculty are attracted to a winner. They want to be a part of an institution that's recognized as world-class, and we are that. And so it makes our job of both recruiting and retaining the best faculty easier to be a member of the AAU. But I have to remind you one more subtle point here. There are many organizations in the country that organize institutions. APLU, for example, is of great value to us, ACE, and others. But there is no organization of higher education institutions in the world that is sought after as much as AAU. When we meet twice a year in Washington as chancellors and presidents, cabinet secretaries, members of Congress, director of NIH, NSF, and so on, come to us. So Missouri has a seat at the table that only 59 other institutions have. And that's something you don't want to give up. We shape national policy in science and technology and higher education every time we meet. And we're the only organization sought after in that way. We really are. So, our 2 basic strategies are very simple. We need to leverage who we are, the strengths we've noted, and the fact that we are a more collaborative institution than most of our peers. And the key to our success is faculty, faculty, faculty. We have to attract and retain the very best faculty. We have some strengths. I won't read the slide for you, but we have some unique strengths. Only a few institutions in the country have a school of medicine, a school of law, a school of veterinary medicine, an extraordinary agricultural and extraordinary engineering research enterprise. And by the way, we have the largest, most powerful research reactor in the country. Those are things that set us apart from the herd. And we must use those strengths as a way to build greater strengths going forward. So, last year, beginning of this fiscal year, before it began, we approached President Wolf as he was looking at how to allocate scarce new resources coming into the system, and our focus was specifically on one thing: attracting and retaining the best faculty. And this summarizes the basic strategies here. Through that faculty attraction, we're going to do the following. We're going to build on our strengths. We're going to hire faculty, not randomly, but faculty who contribute already to our strengths. That will raise our stature. It will automatically bring new research expenditures to the table and therefore improve our standing in the AAU. We just can't, though, harm the institution. We cannot stop doing some things. Because I must remind you that overarching those two things I mentioned a while ago about AAU status and membership is the fact you must be a comprehensive research university. Georgia Tech and Texas A&M were late to the table. They had all the metrics they needed to be members, but they weren't invited because they weren't judged to be comprehensive enough. Until they showed the world that they were more than engineering schools, they weren't invited. And in fact, the two schools in the country with the highest metrics AAU utilizes aren't members. That's because they are really medical schools only. They don't have anything else. And therefore, they are not comprehensive and therefore don't belong. So we can't stop doing humanities. We can't stop social sciences. We can't stop doing the things that make us comprehensive. This is a quick look here. I won't bore you with this. This is a 2011 list of research expenditures of all types. We are fifth from the bottom in this list. But the list is not exactly the most accurate list because it lists all research expenditures. We only get to count in AAU our federally competitive research expenditures. And historically, much agricultural research has been discounted because it wasn't competitive. That's changing and getting better in our favor, but it's not totally done yet. Also, I remind you, there's a normalization here. They don't take these raw numbers. They divide them by the number of tenure-earning faculty you have to allow for small and big universities to be on the same playing field. So these numbers, these raw numbers, are not what's used. It's the actual number divided by the number of faculty you have who are tenured or can earn tenure here at the university. We therefore have gone after very, very focused way, hiring faculty strategically. The funding allocated in this fiscal year by the President has been used specifically to go after faculty with these things in mind right here. And you'll note the very last point there on the right-hand column. We have, over the last year, specifically partnered with Danforth Plant Science Center in St. Louis to hire 4 faculty jointly. We will count all 4 because they'll all be tenured here at Mizzou. In terms of our metrics, we can do that now. But 2 will be residing in St. Louis, and 2 here will each pay half. Very recently, the system is supporting, through President Wolf, a project with Cheryl Schrader and I to be able to hire jointly some extraordinary engineering faculty that'll be joint between S&T and Mizzou as well. We see this as a way to leverage our resources here, and we both win from that. This is a chart put together by Hank Foley. He laid out at the end of the last fiscal year, we were looking for these new funds, the idea of hiring 20 signature or strategic faculty. And this is not a stone-carved sheet here, but one that guides us in terms of where those faculty will reside in terms of disciplines across the campus. But these are going to be faculty who are in mid-career. They are successful. They're people already doing well. and therefore moving them is not trivial. They're happy where they are. So we have to be pretty special to get them here as well. The good news is we've been successful. I'll mention 3 specific individuals right now. Tom Spencer, a world-class animal science faculty member who has large funding already in hand. The little pyramids you see here represent different collections of data which put forward a thing called the H-index, which is a joint measure of the productivity in research of a faculty member and the impact of their research. Basically, an index of 10, for example, means you published at least 10 papers that have been cited at least 10 times in impactful journals. And so we seek people with high H indexes because they have been shown by the research done around this to be correlated with those who are National Academy members, Nobel Prize winners, and people who are recognized by their professional societies at a level recognized by the AAU. So the H index is a predictor of your recognition as a successful member of the faculty. David Singh in physics, highly cited physicist, a theoretical physicist who already meets one criteria. He's a fellow of the APS, so he already counts in terms of this. Oops, I had one more in here I thought. Let's see, is that right? Oh yeah, there are 2. I missed Lloyd Sumner there. Lloyd comes to us from the Nobel Institute down in Oklahoma, where he is one of the most extraordinary people in metabolomics. He's bringing with him equipment and a laboratory which will set us apart from the herd again in terms of our ability to do certain kinds of research in terms of what the genomic impact of the metabolism of a living organism is. He also brings with him the fellowship in the AAAS, which counts as a metric towards that. Just to give you a measure, the most recent 5 faculty hired under this program that President Wolf funded. This is just a faculty hired very recently, as of last week, bring well over $6 million of existing funding with them when they get here, not counting the proposals they have in process of being evaluated today, which have high probability of success, and sub-recipient agreements they bring with them as well, where they have gotten the primary grant and they fund others. We get to count that money immediately as part of our expenditures here at Mizzou. So you see, this is an automatic win for us, right? They bring with them their citations, their awards, and their money, all 3 of which count towards our AU metric. This is an impactful way to do it. Hiring a new faculty member, fresh PhD, may be the right thing to do in many cases, but they will not bring with them these kinds of things. They must earn them going forward. Before I get to this last slide, let me just say a couple of words about that. We, as you know, invested last year with the system's help in a voluntary separation program to encourage long-serving tenured faculty to retire now and not later. My best guesstimate was we'd have 60 faculty taking advantage of this. We had 110. That is 10 times the number of faculty retiring typically in a given year who are tenured. So we have a unique opportunity here at Mizzou to renew our faculty and not only hire these extraordinary 20-plus mid-career faculty, but to fit around them fresh new faculty who represent the future, not the past, of research. They're looking forward, not looking back. They're going on the cutting edge of what's today and tomorrow going to be important, not what was important 30 years ago. And so this is a unique moment for Mizzou. We haven't had this before, the chance to really renew our faculty at 2 levels. At the mid-career level of impactful faculty already proven in their capabilities, and to add to them extraordinary young people who bring energy and vision and the ability to take this forward, not just for a few years, but for the long haul. And not only get us where we need to be in terms of our metrics, but keep us there. That's the important thing. That's my report, Mr. Chairman. Any questions I might answer before we go on to the next topic?
Questions?
Well, one, so out of those that took early retirement, there must have been a few who count for us toward AAU.
Yes.
If we selectively offer them some post-retirement appointment, do they continue to count even if they're retired and on a part-time status?
Give you an example, Marilyn Rance a Curators professor of nursing who has had the largest grant ever received by the University of Missouri, is remaining here as a research faculty member without tenure. She still counts. In fact, she counts doubly. She won't count in the denominator, but she will count in the numerator. So she actually is a double benefit to us here. Her money will continue to count, but we don't divide by her number. She's not tenure earning anymore. And so you see it's a double win for us here. So we have been able to persuade faculty like her who want to retire right now officially to come back to us as a non-tenured track faculty member doing what they do best. Also, others who are great teachers are staying with us as well. They won't count against us, the denominator, but they will continue teaching here and doing what they do very well also. So this, again, isn't ubiquitous, but it is a number of faculty, 110, who are going to remain here in different roles, doing, again, what they do best.
I like the idea of you leveraging, you're working with S&T faculty and sharing faculty. Does that count towards the faculty for the AAU status?
Yes, it can. It depends on how we do the details of this. But for example, if we have a faculty member who is 51% here and 49 at Cheryl's Place, who's an academy member, we get to count that academy member, for example. They get to decide where they put their academy status at. The funding will be determined on how we decide on how we allocate the funding across the campuses here. When you go for a proposal being funded by a federal agency, how much comes to Mizzou, how much comes to S&T will be a negotiated matter, and each can count the appropriate parts of those things. But our win here is really being able to get a twofer sometimes, to be able to hire two people when each of us could only hire one. And we can double our investment that way. And this is something we'll do together, Cheryl and I, but also the system through President Wolf's promise to provide additional resources to enable this to be a larger program than it would be if we just did it by ourselves.
You talked about competitive research and you've talked about, non-competitive. At some point you indicated that you'll be able to add the non-competitive. How much non-competitive do you have?
NSF, NIH, and other federal sources oftentimes are accountable because they're viewed as being competitive. That is, you go into a peer review process with a proposal before you are awarded that money. Historically, USDA was the critical issue. USDA gave block grants to the states for research, and the states doled the money out without any competitive process at all. It was done politically sometimes, and that was discounted, you see. But what has happened in the last 3 or 4 years is they've created a group within USDA called AFRI, which is a competitive process built on NIH model. And so there, if you go AFRI money, and more than half the funding now in research university is AFRI money, that gets to count. We had to argue for that. The land grants in the AAU fought hard to get them to recognize this money, and they've now recognized that. So it's taken a while to get them off their old model, which they thought this didn't count, to a place where it does count now.
So
and it's going to help us over time.
So that would elevate us over what period of time?
It's already begun to help in some respects because, but again, realize AAU uses a 3-year window. And it's always trailing. The data from the sources they go after is usually 2 years behind. They're getting now 2013 data, you see. And they look at 2011, 2012, and 2013. So our past haunts us.
Gotcha.
But as we move forward in time, the window moves forward, and we'll see improvements occurring that way.
Gotcha.
Chancellor, I applaud you for the new hires. How are we doing retaining our best and brightest? I mean, over the years, some of our best and brightest have been picked off by other universities. How are we doing about retaining those, and what are we doing to retain them in the future?
That's a weekly task, typically, sir. We have certainly lost faculty over time. The faculty we're hiring, I mentioned a moment ago, are somewhere else now, I see. We're taking from them. We're doing the same thing ourselves. The key is 2 things. We have to make this the place they want to be. Now, that is tied to many things. It's not always salary. It may well be simply their colleagues. Faculty tend to work no longer in isolation, but in groups. And so the quality of your collegial group is key in many cases to people wanting to remain someplace versus going someplace else. So we have to not only work on one, but work on many. We have to provide the resources. Oftentimes, They want to stay, but this is a leveraging moment for them. So they'll not money for their salary is not the issue. It's usually, I want a bigger lab. I want this piece of equipment. They want some things like that, and that's where the provost and the dean and I and Hank Foley come together, and we figure out how we can meet that particular requirement. So we counteroffer, and that's a fairly frequent process here in the zoo. As we get the cherry picking going on, we're doing ourselves. So this is a game played nationally among all these best schools. We're all looking for good people. And these proven commodities are the ones you really want to go after because there's no risk. They're going to be good here because they were good where they were. And we want to be sure we retain the best. So this is the thing we worry about every day. I can't guarantee we'll keep every one, but our record in the last 6 months has been pretty good.
Chancellor, first, again, I want to commend you on the progress you've made and some of the things you've done. Early in the presentation you had, I think it was had been lifted from the strategic operating plan where it talked about recruiting best student and faculty. And I want to just talk for a second about the student side of that. And I understand that it's faculty, particularly on where we're going now. And I don't want to be the conversation about students necessarily be a distraction. But when I look at some facts I'm going to bring up on other institutions that are aiming for AAU status, like University of Georgia and Florida State, I notice a trend in the profile of their students going up in preparation for this. So I want to talk about that for just a second. What I have found, and it's hard to get these statistics exactly right, but academia seems to measure the profile of the students at the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile on ACTs. And Missouri is 23, 28, meaning 50% of our students are in that. And it's hard to get the statistical data, but we seem to have, from what I could tell, been fairly similar now for a significant period of time. That could be wrong. I look at some other interesting things here, and the data could be wrong, but I don't think so. I have Auburn at 2008 being the same as our profile, 23-28. Their most recent profile is 24-30, a significant change. Alabama, if this data is right, it's almost unbelievable, has gone from 21-27 in 2010 to 22-30 in just a few years. Georgia has gone from 25-29 in 2010 to 26-30. Florida now, a land-grant institution, is 26-31. So, and again here in this state, Missouri S&T, and I've seen it measured two ways, is either 25-31 or 26-31, competitive with the most prestigious of the universities. Now my question is, without it being a distraction, is that at least an indirect driver of what we're trying to accomplish? How have these other institutions done this? Is this something that we should be looking at? Because I will say one more thing, as a parent and talking to parent about brands, that profile matters in the brand. I can assure you, when parents think they have bright students, we all do, looking at where our children go to school.
It's pretty easy to look at U.S. News and places like that and get this data in some fashion. And again, it isn't attractive. There are two answers to your question. One is students do matter a great deal. Faculty who are great want great students. I've been a faculty member a long time. It is a joy. It's a joy to be able to teach students who are bright and eager and want to do more than you're asking of them. Especially our goal here at the undergraduate level is to have the opportunity for every undergraduate to engage in unique scholarship with a faculty mentor. Undergraduate research experiences changed my life in the 1960s. It was very rare then. And I viscerally believe this is an important thing to do. We have too few of our undergraduates now, we have many, but too few, who are really able to participate with faculty in research activities, in discovery and creativity activities that really will change their lives. Faculty love that. They love to be able to work with the best. And so there's an indirect driver, as you said here. We will get better faculty if they see better students here. Now, to answer your other question, before I got here, we were moving towards a change. So during the fiscal year, last fiscal year, we made some assessments about this in terms of where we were. And beginning with the class recruited last fall, we began to target more heavily high ACT students. And last year we had the largest number ever here in terms of plus 30 over, in terms of ACT scores here among our entering freshmen. So we started what they did at Alabama and Auburn and Georgia later than they did. They started before we did. We shifted our scholarship policy and specifically went after students with those kinds of high achievements. And it is in part a money situation, not only, but a money situation there. And that's how those schools have done that. They have specifically redirected resources to attract better students, most of whom are out of state. You know, those are small states. Those states are smaller than we are. Alabama, Mississippi, for example. They have deliberately gone after out-of-state students, and their proportions in some cases now are out-of-state student populations more than half their student body at the undergraduate level. And so you have a shift in places like Oklahoma and Alabama and Mississippi towards going after nationally students of high achievement and giving them what it takes financially to get them there to your school. The advantage we have here is a couple of things. We are in a better place geographically. It may not seem like that, but we have Chicago, we have Texas, we have places we draw from now, and those are growing sources for us and out-of-state students who are bright. We go after aggressively in-state students who otherwise might leave the state and be attracted away to Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, by the money there. And so all I can tell you is we recognized this before I got here. We have been able to change our policies to address it, but we've only got 1 year. That's why you're not seeing the shift yet. I think another 2 or 3 years of continuing on this pathway here, we'll begin to see a measurable change in our profile that you're talking about.
Well, let me say first, I appreciate that very much, and I'm glad, because I don't know if I'm right, but it concerns me to watch, if we compare ourselves to the SEC and our football salaries, and we're not being comparable in our ACT profile, that concerns me. The one thing I'd request of you and you, President Wolf, I've tried to review the strategic operating plan and the vision statement, and I find measurables, and one thing you've taught me, President Wolf, is the importance of measurables, and we have a lot of numbers in there. What I found, and I may have missed something, was a rather vague statement about improving ACT, and I would like you to at least consider and bringing to the board whether that vision statement should have hard numbers on the profile of our students and how we measure the quality of our students.
Understood. We'll work on that issue. Mr. Chairman, anything else?
Oh, sir, thank you. Next item is the consent agenda.
Yeah.
For a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Cindy, please call the roll.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Hendrickson?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
All votes in favor?
The next item on the agenda is the President's State of the University Address. John.
We're losing curators fast, and it's probably because I'm speaking.
Why don't we take a 5-minute?
That's a good idea.
Take a 5 minute. I'm serious about 5 minutes.
Everybody live.
Are we ready to get started?
Yes.
Everybody could have a seat, please. Quickly. You're going to miss the fireworks. Thank you. I have the good fortune to represent the University of Missouri System in the annual State of the University speech. Those that work with me on a frequent basis understand I'm a 3 to 5 guy, and that's not the average hours I work in a day, but I always am a believer that you can focus on anything between 3 to 5. Anything more than 5 gets a little bit confusing, and it really doesn't get the message across. So today, I've got 3 topics that I'm going to cover, which is our progress against our strategic plan, how we're doing against our mission statement, and lastly, I'm going to explain the difference between a fox and a hedgehog. For those of you that love animals, then you should be paying attention, because this might be the highlight of the presentation for you. In all seriousness, there is purpose and meaning, as you'll soon see, between the difference between a fox and a hedgehog. Before I get into the status and success against our metrics on the strategic plan, as well as our mission statement, it's appropriate to point out that Elson Floyd's leadership allowed us to have the success that I'm going to talk about today. During his leadership here at MU, some things that we still use to this day was he was the one that announced the 4th pillar of economic development, which is critical to our success and meaningful for our great state. He also consolidated how we approach our political leadership with one message across the system and across the 4 campuses, and he did that organizationally by consolidating government relations and all the initiatives that were occurring on the campus. Lastly, like myself, he had the good fortune to see record enrollments, and his focus on student success was unparalleled. And so that allowed for us to build off of his success, build off of those great decisions that he's made. I only had one chance to get to know Elson as I relayed this to others on Wednesday when we had this nice recognition event for Elson. The one time I met him at the APLU conference shortly after I joined as the president of the university, he came up to me, and Elson's a large man, for those of you that haven't met him in person. And the first thing he says, "Are you still living in that crazy house?" And I said, "Yes." And then he hugged me. And I'm used to handshakes, and when somebody that large hugs you, you're kind of a little bit uncomfortable. But that was Elson. Elson is just this wonderful person, and we had a really great conversation. So prayers and thoughts go out to Elson and his family, but it's important for us to recognize that the success that we have here at the University of Missouri system is greatly influenced by Elson. So let's get into where we are. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of records, and I'm going to be proudly talking about a lot of records that we have at the University of Missouri system. This State of the Union or State of the University address covers our fiscal year 2014 to 2015. It actually ends on Tuesday of next week, but in the last 12 months of our fiscal year, we've seen all-time highs in graduation. We graduated 10,400 in May, which is a record. We've seen all-time highs in our largest revenue driver is student credit hours, and we delivered 1.79 million of student credit hours, which is also an all-time high. As Curator Steelman challenged us with in terms of focusing on ACT, we have an all-time high in the average ACT across all students on our 4 campuses. All-time high on underserved minorities, and our demographic is starting to look more and more like what we are serving in the state of Missouri. So we have seen wonderful results thanks to the great leadership of this team in the last 12 months. Also, we challenged ourselves, at least I initiated a challenge to the leadership team as well as to the board to invest in making sure that we have a safe and secure campus. And we've invested significantly in our Title IX, getting our policies and our practices as current and as best practice as possible, investing in roles, investing in training where all our employees have been trained. All our students, incoming students, are being trained as we speak. And our aspirational goal was to be an exemplar in higher education. What you're seeing is that we really are being looked at as a model. Let me tell you why. Obviously, you read about what's going on with the Greek system here at the MU campus, my alma mater. It was described as Wolf is crazy. He's trying to keep females out of fraternities. I mean, there was a lot of descriptions that just weren't untrue. What the genesis of it was, we had leaders from the fraternity alumni consortium came to Bowen and I and said, we have some ideas. We know it's important to the both of you that we have a safe and secure environment. We want you to know it's important to us as leaders of the fraternity community, and we've got some ideas. And they vetted some ideas with us. Some of them were interesting. Some of them were a little bit extreme. We challenged them to get with their colleagues on the sorority side, which they did. We also challenged them to invite students into the conversation. There was a very, very successful meeting over the weekend where they vetted some of these ideas, and some of these ideas are going to be rolled out in the fall semester. I couldn't be more prouder of our Greek leadership, and that leadership is not just the alumni or the members, but it's the actual students, because the Greek system is very, very important to what we do on all 4 campuses, and we've taken a leadership position in that. That's one example. Another example of the University of Missouri system being the exemplar for others to follow. Claire McCaskill, I was with her last week. The morning that I met with her in the afternoon that morning, she was at a national conference for athletic directors. It was called the National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics. She made a comparison in front of all the ADs on a national basis of how we react to student-athlete issues. And she made a comparison to a school that Garnett's very familiar with, Florida State, in terms of how they reacted to a student-athlete issue, and compared that to how MU reacted to a student-athlete issue. And obviously, she said this is the best practice. The other one, not so much, was her characterization. But also, that afternoon when I was talking to her, and I was thankful that she called us out, she did make the comment to me that she said, if I had $1 for every time you and I spoke about Title IX, I'd be a rich woman. I wanted to comment, well, I thought you were already rich, but I didn't think that was appropriate, but she did say that. So last point about Title IX and safety and security is we were asked by Faculty Council and MU to have an outside independent expert in this space take a look at all the things that we've done. My synopsis of that outside independent expert's conversation with our team was they looked at our policies, they looked at our practices, they looked at our training, and they said, not only is it good, can we take some of that back with us? Because we think you got it right. So we are getting validation on a frequent basis that our aspirational goal of being a leader in higher education, on having a safe and secure environment, we're realizing it. That being said, it's a never-ending journey, and we have to continue to focus on it. It's not a 2014-15 initiative. It's an initiative that we'll continue to focus on. We will have annual reporting that shows what has happened in terms of training, what has happened in terms of Title IX reporting as well as Clery reporting, and we'll be providing that later in this calendar year to the board so that we maintain the focus and we continue to improve. Last year, we also, as you heard from Steve Canor as well as Brian Burnett, experienced some significant support from the state. You can see the picture of the 4 new buildings that are going up. I'll remind the audience that these 4 new buildings compose 169,000 incremental feet. Also, we had the maintenance of the 4 buildings that were bonded by the state. That amounts to 393,000 feet. So we have, as you heard from Steve Canor, 562,000 incremental feet of classroom and lab space that is necessary to educate the 77,000 students that we've got. We couldn't be more pleased with the state's support of these 50-50 projects as well as the maintenance and repair. That being said, the buildings are nice. They make our campus beautiful, but that's really not what it's about. That's not why we exist. It's about what happens within the building. So what I challenge the team with is, okay, we got all this 500,000 square footage of incremental space. What's it going to be used for? Why is it really that important to us? What I found out was that 32,600 students, which represents 42% of our total student base of 77,000, gets touched by these buildings. 42% of our students will be touched by one of these buildings. They'll either be in one of these buildings that's being built or in one of these buildings that's being maintained and repaired. As we know, academic success is very related to not just the quality of the instructor in front of the room, but the learning environment that you've got and your ability to be successful as a student. You have to have access to labs and to libraries and all that space. So physical space is a requirement, and we're really excited about this incremental space. Last point I'd make about what we've got in terms of maintenance and repair of new buildings. We're forecasting to grow another 10 to 15,000 students across our 4 campuses. When you think about how constrained we are right now, being proactive and building the capacity necessary to handle this 10 to 15,000 additional students by 2020 is absolutely a prerequisite. So fortunately, we've been a little bit more proactive and thoughtful in terms of having the space necessary to continue the excellent academic and research that we do at our great university. So let's get a little bit into what happened in our retreat. Zora Mulligan talked about it a little bit this morning. We got our general officers together for our annual retreat, and we talked about Jim Collins' Good to Great book. He's written a lot about it, and what Jim Collins proposes to companies and to industries, if you want to move from good to great, then there's 5 tenets of moving to good to great. First one is you have to have level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership is described as being ambitious, humble, focused, and always make the right decision, no matter how difficult that decision is, and make sure that you're focusing on the long-term greatness of the institution. So without level 5 leaders, you probably will not move from good to great. The second tenet is you've got to get the right people on the bus. Third is you have to confront the brutal facts. We talked about them this morning, and we'll bring up some brutal facts in just a second. The fourth tenet is you have to create a culture of discipline. And lastly, you have to use technology to accelerate the progress. So now we're getting to another Collins concept, which is, as I described earlier, and I know you're very excited about hearing the difference between a fox and a hedgehog, so here it is, pay attention. Collins uses Isaiah Berlin's essay to describe the difference between a fox and a hedgehog. A fox pursues many ends at the same time and sees the world in all its complexity. They are described as scattered or diffused, moving on many levels. As a result, their thinking is scattered and unfocused, and they can achieve only limited results in the long run. I think some people are starting to think about foxes in their lives. At least I did when I started to think about that description. On the other hand, a hedgehog is somebody that's described as being able to simplify a complex world into a single organizing idea, a basic principle or concept that unifies and guides everything. Hedgehogs are slow and steady, and people often overlook them because they are quite quiet and unassuming. They succeed because they're able to simplify the world and focus on one overarching vision that guides everything they do and helps them succeed against all odds. The quote from Collins that I like the most is the hedgehog concept is not a goal, strategy, or intention. It's an understanding. And an understanding implies that, in Collins' work, that good to great is about making sure that you have that unifying vision established, and you take the hedgehog example and have very steady progress and intention towards achieving those objectives. What's really interesting about the hedgehog concept, or the hedgehog model versus the fox, is it's liberating. It's liberating when you're focused on a single unifying vision. It's liberating because you can say no to those things that just come up. That I think Steve Graham said the next shiny object is, we all like shiny objects, and it's easy to gravitate to that. And to keep you focused and to keep you to make sure that you're achieving success, you have to stay true to who you are. So what we have done in the last 2 or 3 years is we've planned for success. We have goals that are very measurable, that are time-bound, that are specific and important. Those goals prioritize everything that we do. So I can safely say, on behalf of the University of Missouri system, we've planned for success, we're measuring it, and we expect it. We will achieve these goals. So from a strategic planning standpoint, which was the first item of the three that I was going to cover today, we're making progress, and I couldn't be prouder of where we are. The conversation that we had over the summer with the retreat and using these Jim Collins concepts was, how do we accelerate this? How do we do it in 2 years versus 3 or 5 years so that we can come up with new aspirational goals? The same thing that while we focus on the strategic plan, we can't lose sight of why we exist, which is defined by our mission statement. And our mission statement talks, and we haven't changed it, but talks about the importance of discovery and application and preservation of knowledge. It talks about our role in Missouri and Missouri touching every single Missourian. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. Before I get to that, though, it's worthy of just talking specifically. If you had to choose, one or two highlights for each of the strategic plans, this is what I'm going to take you through today. So we're first looking at a very complex chart, intentionally so. I've tried to put all the stuff that's available on the web into one chart. Not that you're supposed to focus on any of the details in the circles or whatever, but let me tell you what we have to be accountable and transparent to is we have our strategic plan defined. This happens to be the system strategic plan. As I've said over and over and over again, and I'll continue to say over and over again because I'm a believer in the hedgehog concept, is there are three things that the University of Missouri system is supposed to do. Number one, we're supposed to get resources, obtain resources and deploy those. And those resources are people, technology, money, and we're supposed to deploy them in a way that each one of the campuses achieve their strategic goals as defined in their strategic plan. And you've seen examples of how we've obtained resources from the state. You've seen examples of how we've obtained resources internally that we can redeploy into the campus's priorities. So that's the first theme. The second theme is about collaboration and shared services or shared resources or automation of an activity one time versus 4 times. Gary Allen took you through the progress that we've made relative to shared services from a technology standpoint, but we've been living in a shared services role for quite some time. We've had general counsel, the legal expertise shared across all 4 campuses for quite some time, our benefits, our finance system, our central bank. I can tell you, and my colleagues, when I go to these APLU events and these others, is my colleagues want to be me. They're trying very, very hard to try to get this kind of shared services. They're trying to get procurement centralized. How many years ago did we do that? 10? When did we do procurement? 5 or 6. So we did it 5 or 6 a year. And we're trying to do things like that, or central benefit administration, global grading, where we have everybody in the right categories. We're putting in performance compensation systems across the campus, one performance compensation system that allows us to attract and retain the best and the brightest by challenging them with reasonable goals and measuring progress against that. So we are going to be doing more of that. Sharing of best practices. The Comprehensive Retention Initiative is a perfect example of it, and expect from us more to come, because if we can get the best expertise, sharing best practices and resources and doing it 1 time versus 4 times, we will all prosper in that future state, and that's where we are definitely heading. The last theme that we have that we've made considerable progress on is the messaging and communication of the University of Missouri system, be it the Show Me Value Tour, be it the very proactive editorials that we've done. Steve Knorr took you through the specifics. Expect from me and expect from the rest of the leadership team for us to do more. I believe the conversation about the University of Missouri system and higher education has shifted to the positive in the state of Missouri. So let me talk specifically about some wins that we have in the last 12 months on each of the campuses. You heard more eloquently from Bowen than I could ever tell you about, but we are moving consciously and intentionally towards a different position in the AAU, and the different position is a higher position. And why are we doing that? The way that we're doing it is by freeing up resources, both from the reallocation of budgets at the MU campus, as well as strategic funding from the system. We're intentionally investing in high quality, very productive faculty. High quality faculty will also attract high quality students, and the success is going to drive those numbers up. This is purely an example of getting the right people on the bus. Here's another example, UMKC, Student Success and Urban Engagement. The 6-year graduation rate of UMKC has gone from 43% to 52%, which is a 25% increase in 4 years. That is dramatic, especially in an urban university. It is huge, the progress that they made, and it wasn't by chance or by luck. It was intentional. The investments have been made. It's been called out in their strategic plan, and I expect that they will achieve their target of 55% by 2018, and most likely will go way above that 55% target. At S&T, also seeing some success. They had a specific goal of expanding online learning, and they have increased year over year student participation on online learning by 71%. They now have 2,583 students enrolled in a class. Their goal in their strategic plan was 2013, so they surpassed their goal. But what's great about S&T is they have level 5 leadership that are ambitious, humble, and will be increasing that goal because of the aspirational and the ambition that they have of that leadership. So I fully expect that goal to be even bigger in the future. But congratulations to S&T for achieving that goal before the 2018 timeframe. Let's take a look at another great story, which is UMSL. UMSL had just graduated 3,146 students, and that is on plan to achieve the 3,600 goal. The growth goal in terms of graduates is about 2x what they had been seeing historically. So this is a very, very aggressive goal. Chancellor George describes it as, gosh, it took a lot of invested resources to see this progress, but that is exactly what we should be doing, is investing in the priorities, and that's exactly what Chancellor George and the rest of the team did, that said, we are going to get this number, and we are going to put the resources behind it, because that urban university is the major provider of employees in the metro area of St. Louis, and for them to achieve their mission of being the provider of employees of choice, then they have got to get that number to 3,600, and they are on path to get there. So congratulations to them. So where we are right now is, here's a picture of the recognition on all these 50-50 projects that we've got achieved. As you can see, Governor Nixon joined us, and I applaud Governor Nixon and very thankful for his support. Getting his support, as well as the General Assembly's support, was challenging to say the least. It required a coordinated effort. First of all, it required an initiative, an innovation that took place 2 or 3 years ago, where the statute was signed that there is an opportunity, if you can raise the money, for the state to match that. That initiative at the time, I thought which was led by Steve Knorr, I thought was interesting, but I didn't think we'd ever get any money. I was a non-believer at the time, but he convinced me to become a believer. And in fact, with very thoughtful and provoking justification, we went to the General Assembly, got their approval with board's help. We had board members that are with us now and board members that unfortunately have graduated from the board. We had conversations in a way that got the governor's support. The monies were released, and we're now working feverishly at getting these 5 buildings erected. The goals that we set back in 2012 are worth reminding everybody. In 2012, when we finished up the strategic planning process, we said we would increase core appropriations by 20%. We were flat to declining at that particular point in time. So 20% growth took this kind of funding from the state to this kind of funding, which was aspirational, to say the least. If you think that was aspirational, we also challenged ourselves for $200 million of capital. We had 0 capital funding from the state in the last 10 years. So going from 0 to $200 million, the conversation that took place back in 2012 was Nikki and I were talking about, well, we got to have these goals set. And I said, how about 200 million? And she said, Kenora's going to die, but I think that's a good one. But anyway, we talked to Steve about that, but these were aspirational goals. In 2012, if you said the state of Missouri would finance $200 million a project, I think a lot of people, in the next 5 years, a lot of people thought you were crazy. But in fact, this is happening. You could see that we're on a path towards getting this funding. So this comes from being hedgehogs. This comes from being focused on a vision, focused on getting resources. Once you get the resources, deploying them in the best way that you can advantage each one of the campus's strategic plans. And we've stayed true to the hedgehog. I don't know that we knew we were hedgehogs at the time, but now proud to say that we are very effective hedgehogs. So now let's talk about, I'm moving to the last item that I promised you I'd talk about, which is our mission statement and how are we doing relative to that. Our great state of Missouri, which I'm proud to be back in and have spent most of my life here. Here's the brutal fact that everybody knows. Missouri has been described as a regional state where you've got St. Louis that looks east, you've got Kansas City that looks west, you've got the Boot Hill that looks south, you got Springfield, Joplin that kind of looks south-southwest. Well, the brutal fact is we should be looking at each other versus looking outside the state, and we do too much of that. We look outside the state for leaders or for aspirations or for partnerships or for collaboration. We got to figure out, God forbid that St. Louis and Kansas City could work together on something. God forbid that Joplin and Springfield could work together on something. We've got to figure out how to look to each other versus look outside the state. We need something that brings us together as a state. One thing that brings us together as a state. And what we've heard the governor talk about, as well as other political leaders, is that education equals economic development. Education equals economic development. So if education is a precursor to economic development, what is it that we can do to improve our education so that we have more jobs, we attract more businesses, we have a more thriving economy? And what the challenge is what is the inspiration to have more education? What is the inspiration? Is it clear? Is it convincing? Is it compelling? Well, when I go out to 20 schools in the past 2 years, and you can see it in the eyes and you can hear it in their voices as they express, 7th and 8th graders, over 7,000, express their concern about going on to college. And the questions around, I can't afford it, the questions around scholarships, what kind of scholarships, who's the cheapest, how much does it cost? When they're asking these questions as 7th and 8th graders, it is definitely on their mind. It's on their mind because they have parents that talk about it. Parents are already setting expectations. I'm sorry, you can't afford to go to college. Or, I didn't go to college. Why should you go to college? These are unfortunately expectations that in 7th and 8th grade, if they're opting out, if they are discouraged in 7th and 8th grade, how are they going to finish high school? Or what is the motivation or the inspiration that they need to graduate? Where does it come from? So we need inspiration, if in fact education equals economic development. Where does that inspiration come from? Also, what is the clarity? What is that clarity that I can clear that financial hurdle? If the hurdle that most students and most parents are thinking about in 7th and 8th grade or earlier is I can't afford it because I read about the cost of education going up 400%. I read about student debt being larger than credit card debt. I read about all that stuff. I can't afford it as a parent, or the student can't see clear to getting the resources. So if there's two things that are necessary ingredients to success, which is inspiration and a clear financial path, what can we do about it? So I've talked about this before, and I'm going to talk about it again, a concept called Missouri Promise. It's a concept that I've talked to Clint Zweifel, our treasurer, about for quite some time. The reason why I've been talking to him about it is I've been doing Show Me Value tours. He has the 529 program, which is the savings program that parents and grandparents can initiate early on to save dollars for their grandchild or their son or daughter to go on to college education. So he's out on the road drumming up interest in the 529 program. I'm out on the road drumming up interest on going on to college. And what we talked about is we need to have something that inspires and gives people a clear financial path so that we can stop some of the leakages that we've got currently in our educational system. So let me describe where we are, in the state of Missouri, and I'd like to say this is good news, but it's not. So here are the facts. For every 100 ninth graders that are in school now or just graduated, for every 100 ninth graders in the state of Missouri, only 22 will get a degree, be it a 2-year or 4-year degree after high school, 6 years after high school. Only 22. So that means 78% of those ninth graders fell out of the pipeline. The other fact is if you are a high achiever being defined by you have a grade point of 3.0 or greater, and we have 28,000 students in the state of Missouri that are graduating high school with a 3.0 or greater, and that's 28,000 of a total 60,000. Only 17,000 go on to college in Missouri. So we have 40% dropout in the high achievers. And some of those actually go to college. 3,000 go to college, but they go to college outside of the state. So if you look at that chart and you focus on the right-hand side, which is, okay, we get them in college. If our mission statement was just about, we're going to be the best University of Missouri system we possibly can, and we're going to have student success, and we're going to do a great job, and we're going to focus on just that right side, we'd be done. But the problem is our mission statement says something different. It's about lifelong learning. It's about serving all 6 million Missourians. So we cannot close our eyes to the pipeline, the K through 12 pipeline. It is not in our mission statement. If we want to change our mission statement, we can close our eyes and just get what we deserve or get what comes out of the pipeline. And perhaps if we want to improve our ACT, which Curator Steelman has challenged us with, we can do that. We stop recruiting in the state of Missouri. We'll go outside, go get bright people in Illinois and Kansas and throw dollars at them and have them come here. The issue is we're not the public land-grant research institution serving the mission that we have to. So we have got to figure out a way to inspire those students through the pipeline and get better college going rates and have academic progress, or people that are academically capable of going on to college. And so if that's the problem, what are we going to do? What's the solution? So we look to other states. I had the good fortune to live in the state of Georgia. My twins were born there, and at an early age when they're going to elementary school, they're talking about the Hope Scholarship. It was put in place 21 years ago. The Hope Scholarship was intended to improve the college going rate, was intended to decrease the cost of attendance, was intended to keep more of the bright students in state. That was the purpose of it. And so after 21 years, it is still recognized as the best state scholarship system of any state initiative that has taken place. Specific quotes from research that has been done over the last 20-plus years on the Hope Scholarship. These are quotes from research done on the Hope Scholarship. Hope encourages students and their families to commit greater effort to schooling. When your elementary kids are talking about it and the parents of elementary kids are talking about it, just get a 3.0. Everybody knows what a B is, and if you don't get anything, if you don't get a B, then you get to have a conversation with your parents in the first grade, because that is their financial path towards and their financial security for paying for their students' education. Also, when you think about if it's clear to you as a parent of a student what it costs to go to college at an early age, then your savings plan becomes more specific as long as they continue to maintain their grade point. Also quote, from 95 to 2003 in the early years, they saw SATs jump up. There was some grade inflation, but also that was the corresponding increase in actual academic performance of high school graduates increased. Remedial course enrollment declined in the same period. We spend millions and millions of dollars on remedial courses. Why? They didn't pay attention in high school. They didn't get the academic achievement they should have in the fundamental classes, so we spend millions and millions of dollars trying to get them up to speed and college ready. Not having to spend that money, or kids not having to put those tuition dollars towards remedial courses, is a good thing. Georgia Hope's responsible for the reduction in disparity in the academic performance of different racial groups. It's closed the gap, and we need that so much in the state of Missouri. If we can have a scholarship that can close the gap. I said earlier, one of the design points in Georgia was every year the governor of the state would invite down the valedictorians and salutatorians to the governor's mansion, and every year they tracked this. They asked how many of those students are going to a college in the state of Georgia. Before Georgia Hope Scholarship, 30% would say, yes, I'm going to a college in the state of Georgia. 70% says, I'm going elsewhere. That flip-flop. Now 70% are going to college in the state of Georgia. When you talk about ACT, as Curator Steelman has challenged us, ACT scores, and you look at some great institutions that are trying to be AAU, like Georgia, where on their website they talk about incoming freshmen having an average ACT of 30, which is very, very high. Why is that? The best and the brightest stay in the state of Georgia. Getting into Georgia and Georgia Tech are very difficult. It is no surprise that Georgia and Georgia Tech are two of the top 20 public schools as measured by World News and Report. It is no surprise that the Hope Scholarship wasn't directly related to that. It's no surprise that Georgia Tech was also invited to the AAU. The Georgia Hope Scholarship has improved the quality of both those institutions, and quality be measured by the quality of the students coming in and the quality of the faculty and staff that they can recruit. Also, the borderline students that are kind of wishy-washy about, should I go to college, should I not, as the studies indicate, they push them over the line to go on to college. To this day, 21 years later, it still polls positively. After 20 years of implementing a state-funded program, 80% still are positive about and 81% are knowledgeable about the program. You won't find many state-funded or state initiatives that have this kind of support, but the Hope Scholarship has really been a difference maker in the state of Georgia. So if you think about, so if it happened at the state of Georgia, what should we do in the state of Missouri to potentially use that as a case study or an example in which to grow from? So what we are discussing as a concept of using the same grade point of 3.0, it would be all merit-based as the prerequisite to competing for a Missouri Promise scholarship. It would offset cost of tuition and fees. I've talked to some of the students about this concept. You might expect they're going, woohoo, yeah, do it quickly, and we're going to get behind this, and we're going to vote, we're going to get out and vote, so they're very excited about it because the way it's designed right now, and we're looking for the resources to fund this, but the way it's designed right now is if you get a 3.0 in high school and you are eligible for Missouri Promise, if you maintain a 3.0 for 4 years, you could get $21,000 reduction in your tuition and fees, which would be huge. Interestingly enough, the way that it's been designed right now is that $21,000 is about the average student loan debt for an undergrad student in the state of Missouri. So offsetting that expense would allow students to be focused, graduate in 4 years versus 6 years, because we'll have a limit in terms of how much time or how many hours that you can use as Missouri Promise Scholarship. It gets the pipeline leaks filled, hopefully, so you have more people going to college. They'll be graduating at a faster clip. They'll be competitive in the workforce. As we know, a more educated citizenry is more involved in the communities, makes better life decisions so that they actually live longer. There's less pressure on our social welfare systems and other entitlement systems. So there's all these positives that come about, and also it's going to attract more businesses to the state of Missouri. So we are pressing forward relative to talking about this, and hopefully we can get this on the ballot in 2016 and we can get this passed by the voters. So far, what we've seen when we poll average Missourians across the state, it's being received extremely well. Also, the concept that we've got is fully endorsed by all leaders of the 4-year institutions and all leaders of the 2-year institutions. And we have political leadership on both sides talking about it, and we hope to have this be as bipartisan an initiative as possible. So going back to the mission statement, the real purpose of Missouri Promise is I've highlighted just a piece of our mission statement, is if in fact, and I'm optimistic about that we can get Missouri Promise on the ballot and approved by the voters. It will promote learning by its students from early preschool through K through 12 and even post-college. So we will be better at living and demonstrating the mission that has been asked of us. So in summary, where we are in terms of the University of Missouri system is we had a good year. We have aspirations to be great. We understand the difference between good and great. We have preference to be a hedgehog, not a fox. So we will stay true to our vision. We'll continue to make the necessary changes. We will continue to show the progress as we have on our websites, and we'll continue to do the best that we can to partner with leadership, our political leaders in Jeff City, Washington, D.C., as well as business leaders in our great state of Missouri. So I couldn't be prouder of the leadership team that's represented here and the results that I've just taken you through. That's my President's report.
Now comes a time on the agenda when we ask if any member of the board has anything for the good and welfare of the board. Hearing nothing, we have one other item. I'd like to ask Deputy General Counsel Phil Hoskins to come forward. There's been a resolution proposed. Cindy, would you read the resolution?
Whereas Philip J. Hoskins served with distinction in the office of the General Counsel for the University of Missouri System from March 5th, 1984 to August 31st, 2015. And whereas Phil served twice as acting General Counsel, first from January 7, 2011 to February 14, 2012, and again from November 15, 2013 to January 31st, 2014. And to date, he is the only person to hold the position of Deputy General Counsel in the history of the university. And whereas as the eldest of 13 children, he developed early skills in being a compassionate and understanding mentor for others to learn from and look up to, skills he continued to put into practice at the university. And whereas as an outstanding athlete in Linneus, Missouri, Phil was given the nickname My Fault by his coaches for his willingness to take responsibility for the shortcomings of the team and others. And whereas Phil was an outstanding student at Northeast Missouri State University, now Truman State, and the University of Missouri-Columbia School of Law, and is a veteran of the United States Army, serving his country during the Vietnam War era. And whereas during his 31-year tenure at the university, he saw remarkable growth and change, including an increase in students from 53,000 to 77,000, an increase in the university budget from $497 million to $3 billion, and the appointments of 11 university presidents, 33 campus chancellors, and 3 general counsels. And whereas also during his tenure with the university, his beloved St. Louis Cardinals appeared in 6 World Series, which does not have anything to do with his service to the university, but we know Phil would want us to mention it. And whereas soon after joining the office of the General Counsel, Phil established himself as the go-to person in the office, a lawyer's lawyer. His ability to handle the most complex issues and provide thoughtful legal advice resulted in a common phrase among fellow attorneys and administrators: we should ask Phil. And whereas the period covering his first term as acting general counsel is recognized as one of the busiest years in university history and included MU athletics' move from the Big 12 to the SEC, reforming the university's 50-year-old retirement program, carefully balancing the need to modernize it with the need to honor commitments to current and retired employees, and the multi-million-dollar transfer of a university research enterprise for monetary and organizational enhancement, all while continuing the rigorous duties of acting general counsel. And whereas while serving as acting general counsel, Phil provided legal counsel for the Board of Curators and participated in the search for the 23rd president of the University of Missouri System. And whereas Phil has a true love of his job, manifested by the quality of his work, the unselfish way he conducts himself, the long hours he works, and never saying no to a request for help. And whereas Phil is recognized as the penultimate gentleman, able to remain calm and reasonable and make everything appear under control at all times. And whereas in appreciation and recognition of Phil's service, General Counsel Steve Owens said, "Few, if any, have contributed more to the welfare of the university or served as a better role model for commitment and service than Phil." And whereas in recognition of his contributions to the UM system, Phil was awarded the 2015 University of Missouri President's Award for Outstanding Service. And whereas in everything he has done, Phil tirelessly worked in the best interest of the university. He is a true and ethical professional in all aspects. And whereas Phil's wife Terry and children sacrificed time with him as he attended to the business of the university. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Curators, on behalf of the students, faculty, staff, and alumni of the University of Missouri, and on behalf of the citizens of the state of Missouri, does hereby adopt this resolution in appreciation of the dedicated and devoted service of Philip J. Hoskins. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Board of Curators cause this resolution to be spread upon the minutes of this meeting, and a duly inscribed copy thereof be furnished to Philip J. Hoskins.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
I so move.
Second.
Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cupps?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Thank you all. Those of you who know me know that this position in the limelight's not my favorite one, so I'll be brief. First, I'd like to thank this board and the university for allowing me to represent it for the last 31 years. I could not imagine anything that a lawyer could ask for more than a client that they respect and that they believe in. And so I had that opportunity for a long time. Thank you for that. I'd also like to thank the general counsels for whom I've worked. Bob Ross, now deceased, who hired me. Bunky Wright, who's present here today, who taught me greatly. Steve Owens, the current general counsel. I've learned a lot from all of these gentlemen, and they've helped shape me and help tutor me to provide the service and the commitment that they demonstrated through the time I've worked for them. Lastly, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Office of the General Counsel. I could not imagine working with a greater team of lawyers than I've worked with for the last 31 years. It's a wonderful team. They're great lawyers. They do great service for the University of Missouri. But even more importantly, they're a great bunch of human beings and individuals. And as this board knows, even lawyers can be human beings. That's all I have. Thanks again for the honor. It's been my honor to serve you, and I appreciate that opportunity.
I believe that concludes the public agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn the public session of the Board of Curators?
Second.
Lee, would you call the roll?
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cupps?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All votes in favor.
We will now go into executive session.
Please.